Hi, Facebook family and friends. Suzette Martinez Baladeras here, your candidate for State Assembly in the 38th Assembly District, which is Santa Clarita, Simi Valley, portion of the valley, which is Granada Hills, Porter Ranch, Chatsworth area. I wanted to connect with you today to talk about current events, specifically to talk about public safety, to talk about what's been going on in regards to law enforcement and the very tragic and disheartening murder of George Floyd. There's so much going on in law enforcement and within our community, and I just wanted to have a conversation. So I'm so lucky and blessed to have two amazing former law enforcement officers join me today that have very extensive backgrounds, obviously in law enforcement, but very unique backgrounds too. I'm welcoming Mark Cripe, retired Sergeant Mark Cripe, with the who was formerly with the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department, as well as now Pastor Christopher Keeling. He was also a retired from the LASD, or the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department. Gentlemen, thank you so much for jumping on with me.
Well, thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
So I usually do about 30 minutes of conversation. I usually only have two people, and it goes by super quickly. So with three people, I have a feeling, especially considering the topic, this is going to go by super quickly, and I'm very excited to have you on. And I'm excited, and mostly because we need to have a real conversation about what is going on in our community. I do not like what I'm seeing right now. I mean, yesterday, I was watching the news, and I hear that there's a movement to cancel Paw Patrol. I have a 3-year-old, and it just, when you think things can't get any more on the wrong direction, it layers on top of each other. So, I mean, whether it's talking about getting rid of Paw Patrol or defunding the police, we're on the wrong track, and I think that's counterproductive. You both have extensive histories in public safety and law enforcement. Would love to hear about, what compelled you to enter law enforcement, and kind of what's a little bit of your story. And let's start with Pastor Keeling.
Well, thank you. I noticed you covered Chatsworth, and I'm a graduate of Chatsworth High School, and go Chancellors. But in my growing up in the inner city of Los Angeles, I was actually bused out to to San Fernando Valley, to Nobel Homes and Chatsworth. And while there, I personally have experienced some incidents of racial intolerances, racial profiling by not just not law enforcement at the time, but from students, because it was something new. Okay, well, then I returned back to South Central LA, and then I'm riding around in a nice car and was profiled myself for being a gang member or a drug dealer myself, because my car was nice. So I know what it's like to be profiled, and I know how it makes people feel. So that's one of the things that motivated me into getting into law enforcement, because I figured that, yeah, you can protest and you can hold up signs and you can complain, but the best way to make a change is from the inside. It's from the inside. So when people see you differently, see you doing different things. So not only was I able to be a champion of that, I was able to help other people see that you can be from the inner city, but not act a certain way. And
right.
And so that was my motivation. I worked 30 years plus on the department, and worked with Mark and other good cops throughout my career. And I know for a fact that there's programs out there that will be cut, and that are very detrimental to our young people and to the fabric of our future.
You raise a good point, and it's one thing that I love about, Southern California. We're very different than the rest of the country. And when we look at whether it's the Sheriff's Department, whether it's LAPD, even Border Patrol here in California, we have an extremely diverse law enforcement community, which I love because it looks like California. It looks like Southern California. Mark, you happen to have also a very interesting upbringing that formulated who you are and why you went into the department. So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I grew up in Solondahunga, so I grew up in LAPD's area. Never liked the police, never had a desire to be in law enforcement. It wasn't until my wife and I had gone to Europe and we came back and, we did the homeless thing for a while and got back on our feet. But I realized that it was a good job. It provided a steady check and benefits. And where I was at the time, it seemed like a good move. And so I finished 29 years with the Sheriff's Department. I never got a job I wanted, but I had a Cinderella career. And like Chris, I was offered the opportunity to work in some very unique assignments where I got to put my handprint on some change or some reform from within. And I'm very thankful for that. It's been an incredible 29 years with the LA County Sheriff's Department. As far as things going on today, I'm torn. I have friends and family that are sitting on both sides of this argument, as I'm sure all of us are. And so listening to the banter back and forth is disheartening, because a lot of times a lot of people don't understand the job of the law enforcement officer. Sometimes our elected officials ask our law enforcement officers to do more than they should be doing. And then the battle, in fact, almost all 29 years of my time with the Sheriff's Department, it seemed like every year we were battling some kind of budget cut. So the budget cut idea is not a new thing for us. We try to save as many programs every year as we can that are beneficial to the community. And those are usually the first ones to go, like Chris was saying.
Right. So we're going to get into budget cuts, because I think that while unfortunately this does come up for every department, and depending on the revenue of each, locality and state, it comes up. But what I think most people don't realize is how much both the Sheriff's Department and LAPD have been at the forefront of really diversity training, and really have some amazing task force. I mean, you look at LAPD, and I think it was way back in the 1920s that they created the Citizens Commission to be a part of the conversation and oversight and partners with law enforcement. And, I think that the rest of the country can learn from some of the things that we've done. I know that nationally they're talking about, national legislation or standards that would ban, chokeholds. Well, those have been banned within the Sheriff's Department and LAPD for, decades and decades and decades. Can you tell me a little bit about your experience within your department of diversity training and community engagement and some of the task force that you both worked on?
Well, I'll start first. I had the pleasure of working on a hate crimes task force for over 8 years. And I've also worked community relations, the community-based policing, and I've conducted and facilitated meetings where people from the community were involved. And the bottom line is, when you invite people from the community, your bankers, your clergy, your stay-at-home moms, your business owners, and even the youth within the community, when you invite them to the table to talk about things that are happening in their communities where they live, where we police those units, those areas, but they live in those areas. And for the Antelope Valley, 90% of the officers out there live in that area. So that's a very unique thing in and of itself. So, but when you invite those people to the table and you can hear directly from them what they're hearing from the streets, and then you can talk to them 24/7, 365 days of the week, of the year, and they know you as a person, and they're your advocate. They're like the liaisons between the community and the Sheriff's Department or LAPD. And those are actually some of my best times. I learned the more thing I learned about the community came from them. Yes, I had my own experiences, but when you hear it from somebody else, and it covers all different demographics, and it covers all different age groups, Now you can devise a plan and put a plan together that's going to be beneficial to not just the department, but for those in the community. And that tends to bind the community and build a relationship between the community and law enforcement. And that's what we have to keep doing.
Right.
And that's what defunding would get rid of.
Yeah. So do you think that now, obviously I know that you guys have just left the department recently, but that those relationships, are they going to continue? Are they going to continue? What can law enforcement do better when it comes to building those relationships, especially during this time? I think at this moment, I've never felt anything like this in terms of civil discourse and a lack of respect for law enforcement. Literally cries to, yes, we've talked about, budget cuts, but we've never seen a movement that's been given so much recognition to defund the police. Are you concerned about, and how do we bridge this trust divide right now for officers on the street? Mark, you want to take a stab at that one?
That's a good question. I think there's some things we got to look at a mature level. One, we know that COVID stopped sales tax revenue, and all these public agencies had a huge hit to their budget. Understand that budget cuts were coming. They were going to come. Where they were going to come, that's up to the people that we elect. So law enforcement is one of the big ticket items that most of these cities in the county and they have to pay for. So that was going to come. How do we grow from here? The biggest stakeholder in this problem is the community. And building public trust has been a thing law enforcement struggled with. Some agencies do it better than others. The larger agencies, at least here on the West Coast, from my experience, we put a lot of effort in building that public trust. I cannot say that is the way it is across the United States, but public trust is paramount. And when you have public trust, obviously when you have one of these incidences that goes sideways, and there will be more, unfortunately, I would love to say, hey, there's a fix-all. We can fix this and it'll never happen again. I know that they just passed the no-knock thing, so there's no more no-knock going on. The no-knock warrants were bad. We knew they were bad a long time ago. So all these agencies have got to kind of catch up to speed and bring their policies up to speed, and then invite the community aboard, whether it's a commission or it's like Chris was saying, when you have a cops program, the deputies or the law enforcement officers, they go door to door and they do surveys. They hear what the people need or want in their community as far as law enforcement. And then they develop missions based off of that. But the more that we can build that bridge and work with the community that we serve, the better it is. And then let them see us. I encourage everyone, go on a ride-along. Most law enforcement agencies have a ride-along program. Puts you in that black and white. It puts you, it lets you see what the deputies are seeing as they work. But the more we build that bridge, the more public trust we're going to gain, and then we're going to heal a lot of this ground that we've already lost.
Right. So I'm glad that you brought that up, because my background has mostly been in the nonprofit sector, both in my work at Autism Speaks and now in early childhood education. I run a small nonprofit preschool, and I'm going to talk about two things. I'm coming back to this Paw Patrol thing, because for me, early childhood education is so important. And Paw Patrol, while it's a cartoon, it is educational, right? They make it fun, but I think it's so important to introduce our children to law enforcement. And Mark, you and I were having this conversation earlier. My daughter, I don't even remember what she was doing, but she said something along the lines about she was in trouble, and she's like, I'm bad. Are the police going to come for me? And I kind of had to think about, that how to answer her for a moment, because clearly she watches things, and the bad puppy catches bad people on the streets. But I don't want her to fear police officers or law enforcement, because they're my friends, they're my family. Two, but I think it is our responsibility to tell them, to allow them to start at a very young age to see law enforcement in a positive light so that we can build that trust and community from a very young age. It's also something that I encountered at my time at Autism Speaks. Individuals on the autism spectrum, what is interesting about autism, it's a disorder that is not recognizable. There could be a 6-foot, giant man who looks normal but has severe autism, and maybe having some type of breakdown in public, and law enforcement reports to that scene and doesn't necessarily know what they're encountering. And it could be a life or death situation for individuals on the autism spectrum. So what Autism Speaks does is they do safety fairs where they invite first responders, law enforcement officers to come and to meet the autism community. They do trainings with law enforcement on how to enter a situation with somebody that may be on the spectrum. How do you identify that? How do you de-escalate that situation? Is the department doing this as well? There needs to be a two-way street between community and departments doing this type of work. Have you seen things like this work well, and how do we get to invest in those things? Let's have you go, Chris.
Well, it's unfortunate, but it's just like the corner where there's a lot of traffic accidents. As a result of that, they put up a street sign or a light. Okay. Unfortunately, some of these things happen before we realize that there's an issue. Okay. But once we know there's an issue, then, as for my experience with the sheriff's department, we would attack that as soon as possible and advocate for people who have knowledge in that field of autism or whatever the case may be to come into the department and actually go to the stations, go to the academies, and actually train deputies on how to recognize certain symptoms. We wear a lot of hats. We respond to a call. We don't know whether the person has a mental disorder or autism or suffering from depression, or is it a call that's meant to be an ambush. So our safety is paramount. So we have to make these decisions at the snap of a finger, and we also have to diagnose people. Are they on drugs? And so now we're carrying around a Norcan. So our job continues to get more and more diverse or difficult because we have to wear so many hats. But I do know that the department has always taken those things serious. And when we discover an issue that needs to be addressed, it's addressed immediately. And we get professionals in there who have the knowledge to train and to teach us so we can pass that on to other officers.
Mark, are law enforcement officers responsible for too much? Are they wearing too many hats at this point?
Well, I think so, personally. I think that we're asking our law enforcement officers to do a lot of things and to do them very fast in a very short window, and it's very difficult. So like Chris was saying, safety, you do a safety or risk assessment. As soon as you arrive at a scene, you got to figure out where the threat is, if there's a threat, if a crime occurred, what your legal standing is, what your probable cause is. Is somebody they have a mental health issue? Are they intoxicated or under the influence? And you have to do this in real time as fast as you can and try to de-escalate whatever risk there is, and then deal with whatever problem that you're there for. A lot of people, in fact, everybody calls law enforcement when they're in crisis. We don't really get phone calls to come and join them when they're having a good time. So we're always having contact with the community at a crisis point. And that's the job. That's the job. And you're going to go and you're going to make these assessments. You're going to figure out what the risk is, if there was a crime and whatnot. Some of the things that help are a lot of the youth programs that law enforcement gets involved in, because a lot of times that outreach is to autism programs, or it's like Special Olympics. Deputies are helping kids that are handicapped. So you got these officers being exposed to what that looks like in real time. And then you have these folks realizing that the officers aren't there to hurt them. And what that does is down the road, when you do get out your black and white at a call and you're trying to make an assessment in minutes, you have a little bit quicker time to say, oh, wait, you know what? This person's autistic and probably not really a threat. I'm just going to ask them to put that thing down that they have in their hand or whatever it is without going overboard. Because in that scenario, you can really unintentionally escalate the situation when all you're trying to do is de-escalate it. So the youth programs help. But yeah, you're making decisions at a lightning speed.
So what I think part of, any profession, any industry really needs to build a relationship with the community and recruit their future workforce from the community. But this is a scary job. My father-in-law was a LAPD officer. He was shot during the North Hollywood bank shootout back in the 90s. My husband remembers that day when he got that call and he knew his dad was shot, saw this horrible shooting happen live on TV, and, got that fearful call. I, having friends, lived with friends while they were in the academy. I know what that training is for sheriff's department. It's very intense. The things that you guys see on a daily basis, I can't even imagine or fathom having to see what you've done. It's a hard job, but how do you recruit good people from the communities within to serve on our departments, to be a part of the community's public safety plan?
Well, I like to say that it's definitely a hard job. Okay. And I like to say also that it's not a job for everyone. Okay. But the earlier we start having those relationships with these young people, the better it is, because they get to see you in a different light. They don't see you as the enemy. They don't think that every time something happens bad that we're going to show up, because we have a relationship with them. Okay. So it's important that we start off early. And what's happening now, when I was a kid growing up in South Central LA, my mom actually encouraged me to join the Explorers. Well, she didn't encourage me. She told me I was going to join the Explorers. And so I joined, loved it, 77th Division LAPD. I got in there and loved it. So that's what started me on my path to law enforcement. Okay, so and I know the risks. I knew the risks then. I know the risk now. I have family members, I have even a son that's still in law enforcement, so I know the risks and I know the concerns. But there are a lot of good people out there that still support law enforcement, that has a desire to do the job. But peer pressure is so extremely high. It's not popular anymore to say that you want to be a police officer. Back in the day, you want to be a police officer, people will rally around you and help you. It's not so now because peer pressure is there, but those good people are still there. They're still there and still have the desire. So that means we have to get involved in these programs, get involved in the community academies, encourage these people to do it, because now if they have somebody that's in law enforcement encouraging them, sometime that will nullify the naysayers that's on the outside.
Right. And I think that, to add to that, you're absolutely right. It's part of the job and duty of our community leaders to mentor the next generation of law enforcement officers, whether you're a pastor, whether you're a high school counselor, or a college teacher or professor, or you're just a mentor in a child's life. We should all be looking at, the next generation of our workforce, which includes law enforcement.
Absolutely.
Mark, I want to talk a little bit because about mental health within the department. Again, I didn't grow up in the richest of neighborhoods, not by any means. I've had brothers who have had encounters with law enforcement that were sketchy, to say the least. But I've also have friends and family, as I mentioned, that serve. So I see both ends. I've been on both ends. But let's talk a little bit about mental health within the lives of law enforcement, because whether it's our state prison guards, LA County Sheriff's Department, police department, what you guys are dealing with is hard. And the suicide rate, for instance, for our state prison guards is extremely high. I would refuse from the state, when I'm in the state assembly, to cut resources to law enforcement, because we need to increase resources, particularly around mental health. And not everybody is aware of this. Do you mind talking a little bit about the need for resources for officers and even your own experience in utilizing those resources? Did you hear me? Can you hear me?
I heard you.
Oh, can you take that one?
Yes. Did you hear it, Mark?
I've lost you.
Oh, no.
I can hear you. I can't hear Suzette.
In regard to mental health of law enforcement officers and correction officers, our job is very intense, and we have resources out there, but it's not always a popular thing to say I need help. I mean, I've been involved in situations throughout my 30 plus year career, and the resources were there, but I didn't always seek them out, because we see that as, we actually see it as a sign of weakness, and it's not. You don't realize that it's not a sign of weakness until you actually go. And when I actually was forced to go, not only did it benefit myself, it also benefited my spouse. I didn't have any idea what she was going through. I had no idea until we went to seek out help, and it benefited both of us, but her a heck of a lot more than it did me, because I mean, I didn't know she needed that. I kind of used work and the next call or my partners to kind of bounce things off of. That's what we do. But the resources are there, not necessarily as much as we need. We need more. There needs to be more resources for that, because, like you said, the suicide rate for officers and correction officers is at an all-time high. Those are stressors that the average person have no clue how to deal with that. They've never faced the things that we had to face. Keep in mind, people call us to do things and go places that they're afraid to go and do. But we, as servants of the community, have to take care of that. And then we take care of it, and then it affects us later on. And we don't realize that. I stood at red lights now and at flashbacks. It's something that I never thought I'd deal with. But being retired a year and a half, it still happens. It still happens. So we need people like you in the assembly to keep that at the forefront, so we can get those sources and keep those sources. So it's important. It's important. It's important, definitely.
Absolutely, and that's absolutely part of my commitment. You know, we need to invest more. Yes, I can hear you. Go ahead. Tell him to go ahead if he can't hear me, Christopher.
And I concur with Chris 100%. I've used employee support services myself with my wife. It helped me learn how to disassociate other people's pain. There's a call that I share with people. It was a suicide of a 16-year-old male, and as we were handling this, I found myself getting emotional and having to go back to the black and white to control my own emotions, to basically repress them, so I could be that person of some kind of strength and give the family direction on what's next and what they need to do. But it was an absolute travesty, and to be any part of that, even to witness this family's pain, was a lot. I've had to go and tell a wife that her husband had been killed, to do the death notification. These are the things that wear on us. They're not easy to do. And that emotional impact actually stays with you and grows. And if you don't have the ability to disconnect that, it'll consume you. It'll consume your family. And that's probably why we have law enforcement in this country has the highest rate of suicide, the highest rate of alcoholism. It's absolutely a sad state of affairs. They don't train you how to cope with so much tragedy. We have to learn that either through our peers or through other people. And I'm glad our department actually had employee support services where we could go at any time and start to deal with, okay, here's what I'm struggling with. Here's why. How do I get past this? And they work with us. It's a great thing. I don't know if all these other agencies across the country have that ability, if they have those resources or not.
So it's already been in half an hour. I told you this was going to go by quickly. And it's such a huge topic, but a conversation that has to be had. We're going to have to come back and do it again. But I'd like each of you just to take a minute to, add anything in terms of current events that you kind of want to get across to our community on, the importance of your role, your job, and how to bridge this trust divide that exists right now. If maybe, did you hear that, Mark?
I'll start with
Okay.
Did you hear it, Mark?
No,
Maybe he'll hear it. He'll understand when I. Okay. In closing, I for one think defunding police is the worst idea you can think of. But on the other hand, reform, revisioning is something that always should be on the table, because things change, situations change, dynamics change. And as law enforcement agencies across the nation, we should be aware of those changes and be adaptive to those changes. Policing changes throughout the years. Sometimes it changes from month to month, but defunding police departments has already proven to do more harm than good. So with that, I yield to you, Mark.
Just
Did you hear me, Mark?
ask him for his closing statement.
We need to close this statement, Mark.
And I agree with you. Our communities are constantly evolving. Law enforcement has to evolve with it. The needs are constantly changing. The concept of defunding law enforcement is ambiguous. It's like, okay, what do you mean by that? What's your target? Are there things that we can fund or need to fund, like mental health for the community, things like that? Absolutely. Are there calls and things that law enforcement shouldn't be rolling to? Yeah. If you're talking about getting rid of your police department, it's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. And the threat to your community is going to be astronomical. That's not a good thing. But there's things that law enforcement does need to grow and evolve, and that just has to happen. And now's a good time to do it. And we'll figure it out. We move forward, bring the community involved, get them involved in it, and we move forward as a group and a family.
I agree 100%.
All right. Hey, guys. Well, guys, I just want to thank you so much for jumping on. I would love to have a bigger conversation, maybe with a community conversation. So thank you for coming on. I'm going to pull you off right now. Hey guys, sorry about that very strange ending. We had some connection issues, but we did get to the end of our conversation of our state and our nation right now. So I think next week we are getting the former